Alright, so as you probably noticed from the title, I got to play Assassin's Creed Shadows pretty much since last month, as Ubisoft was kind enough to send review codes very early in advance. The Assassin's Creed franchise has gone through some big ups and downs lately, to put it mildly, and despite what doom scrolling on YouTube may have you believe, it's still extremely profitable for Ubisoft. If it's going to be enough this time around, only time will tell, but before I highlight in more detail my experience with the game, the key takeaway here is that if you're somebody who enjoys AC and been looking forward to play Shadows, you're likely going to continue to enjoy this, and there are some systems here to mix things up. But if you're somebody who got bored of the modern AC formula, those things may prove to not be enough for you. That being said, despite some of the seemingly big changes to the lighting system, enemy AI, and some of the other stuff that Ubisoft advertised in their monthly coverage, I was surprised how familiar and samey the gameplay felt. Make no mistake, if you keep an eye out for them, you will likely spot these changes more, but it didn't take too long for me to get back to my old AC routine. Sneaking around, marking enemies, even that when I felt like it, and then finding more creative ways to eliminate their very existence. You will be doing it so often that eventually you'll end up like me, preferring to go in blind just for the thrill of the hunt. That is why I don't even lament the loss of our avian companion. The game gives ample tools to do that on its own. If anything, I'm more in favor of it, as there are minimal interruptions when going from locking in a target and straight to combat. Additionally, the tools from both protagonists, at least when it comes to direct combat, feel diverse and impactful enough to not make the action too repetitive, at least for a few dozen hours, assuming that you make use of the character's full kit of weapons and abilities. It also helps that things can become very bloody very quickly, something that you can turn off from the settings menu, which I had to do for this video, otherwise YouTube just loves to demonetize it. Overall, combat definitely feels like one of the game's strongest points and even lets me achieve some very strong builds from early on, like for example an infinite slow motion build I was quickly able to patch up thanks to an early legendary Tanto. Now in terms of enemy sponginess, there definitely is some, but only if you play suboptimally or if you just play against enemies that are highly overleveled. If you hated that in previous AC games, I'm not sure what to tell you, it's going to be the same here as well. However, one mechanic that I really liked, despite the fact that it worked against me, was assassination attempts, especially if you're trying to take down a high-level elite that's over-leveled compared to you, like a Master Samurai, for example. They will oftentimes deny your very obvious assassinations, and that is actually such a cool moment. They will grab your sword in a cool way or deny you with a really awesome flare. It's definitely highlighting that level difference between you and them. But make no mistake, you can actually bypass a lot of that if you're approaching them more carefully from the back, or even more so if you match them in terms of leveling, or if you get appropriate gear for that, you can go back to full-on one-shotting them once again. It's just that some of the elite enemies can deny assassinations, which I think just makes them feel more unique. Everybody else is just getting one-shotted anyway, as long as you get close in terms of levels. I also want to further expand on the usefulness of the two protagonists. I thought that eventually, as we play and finish the game, things would end up on more equal footing. Unfortunately, that moment never came, and the more I progressed into AC Shadows, the more it stood out to me that Yasuke in his current form is an afterthought at best or severely gimped at worst, compared to Naoe. The only advantage he has is being more tanky in terms of HP and maybe some of his unique weapons, which admittedly feel very fun and satisfying. But if you're willing to ignore 90% of everything else, which makes Assassin's Creed, you're probably not going to find much enjoyment in playing as Yasuke. So parkour, climbing high places, which make the vast majority of this game, and God forbid jumping, they kinda don't work on him. I get what Ubisoft was trying to do with him, but these game systems are so entrenched into the core of Assassin's Creed, to have a whole protagonist without them kind of feels like counterproductive, especially since older AC games did have bulky characters that were more than capable of assassination work. I imagine Yasuke is what typical high-grade enemies must feel like in this universe when fighting against ninjas that can literally parkour their way to the tallest structure in mere seconds. It just feels lacking. Going back to some more positive notes, I want to talk about the hideout, and while I was not planning to enjoy this initially, it did definitely end up being more useful than I initially thought, and even more so, it doesn't feel like a gimmick either, nor does it overstay its welcome. So you can get involved with it as much or as less as you see fit. Do you enjoy just getting the upgrades it provides? Go ahead, get them, that's going to give you the benefits. Do you instead want to customize almost like a whole town? Go crazy then, the game gives you all of those options. There are many base parts, paintings, decorations, and so on that you can buy or unlock by just playing. For me, it's the usefulness for each of the features that was the highlight here. Upgrading the forge, for example, lets you apply higher quality engravings on your gear, which just makes items much better, and you can reach better builds much sooner. Dojos equally can train allies to have better skills, and stables can improve how many resources you can get per season, but pretty much every single building was useful as it was customizable. Even more so, as you progress in the game, the places also get populated with the allies you recruit, the NPCs that join you. It pretty much makes the whole place feel very lively, which strangely comes in contrast with the open world that should be the one feeling that way. Somehow Ubisoft is able to create the most gorgeous open worlds and sceneries only for them to feel completely lifeless. First of all, I'm just gonna go ahead and say the following: the game world looks utterly stunning. It's clearly the best looking AC game to date. It also helps that the Japan setting is one of the most interesting, and the graphical improvements over here help a ton as well. Going from a foggy morning to a clear day of summer is where I think the game looks at its best. But the seasonal changes to autumn and eventually to winter are also nice in applying extra color palettes that you normally don't have. And winter also comes with its own benefits and gameplay changes. The seasonal change is also very dynamic. For the most part, completing quests is what advances the seasonal segments, and once filled, you can then manually trigger or fast travel for an automatic trigger to the next season. But later on, you will have other ways to change it. Initially, I thought this would bother me, just another gimmick to stay in the way of your progression, but I think that now the way I see it is the seasonal change in Assassin's Creed Shadows is one of the better implemented seasonal mechanics I've seen recently. That also brings other gameplay benefits. So it doesn't stay in the way of your progression, it feels a natural part of the game, and it's one of the first games that actually implements it well enough so that you get both benefits and mechanics that you need to manage here and there. It just fits organically in your whole gameplay loop. But going back at that point I was trying to make about the vastness but emptiness of the open world, yeah, it just feels lifeless like it's always been the case. First of all, they removed the hunting feature that even Valhalla had. I feel that that could have maybe contributed a little bit, and given the fact that this is the same developer behind Far Cry, if anything, I was really expecting more progress to be made at this point and add a more fleshed out hunting feature in an AC game, but that was not the case. Now sure, let's say you don't care about hunting. Well, you're not going to find much reactivity from NPCs either. Sure, crowd density looks big in large cities, but they don't really do much. No NPC schedules, no communications, no unique interactions. Some don't even react at all besides some default flee in panic animations. Instead, it's just predetermined short animations that occasionally attempt to sell you on the idea of a living world, but they never do a good job at breaking that feeling of being simulated. It's even worse outside towns and major hubs, by the way. It's either bandits occasionally attacking each other or creatures you can't do much with. Or, well, in this case, NPCs that may give you rumors every now and then, but some of these interactions feel quite limiting. So if the level of interactivity in the open world is lacking, you can probably expect the same from the story choices and consequences. One of the new aspects Ubisoft wanted to introduce was player agency, making choices with real consequences. However, in practice, most of them have no real impact or just feel like surface level at best. But others completely take out the agency from you altogether. Like for example, there were moments choosing between forgiving or condemning certain characters only for the story NPC next to you to override that choice that you made and spare them regardless, completely disregarding your option in that process. Or choosing between to spare somebody from being executed only for them to say that they need to die anyway because of reasons that, to be honest, you may have other ways to prevent anyway if you really thought about it. Also, I will say that the English voice acting didn't really click with me, so I just swapped to Japanese. Nothing against the VAs or anything, I just settled on that because I enjoyed the story more that way, and I thought that it just processed some of the information and especially the feelings and the action a little bit better because of it. If anything, there's more agency when it comes to allies, if you can put it that way. Your allies, in this case, can be affected by the choices you make in dialogues in the missions involving them. It's still completely binary, mind you, so either choose a dialogue that agrees with them or the one that's opposing their view, case in which you're not going to see them joining your side that often. So no nuance whatsoever, they will just outright refuse if you go against their quote-unquote creed. At least you can romance them, which you do by following specific dialogues with hearts over them, but again, nothing too complex over here to write home about. I've also got to say that Ubisoft's choice of background music is quite interesting, to put it mildly. About 90% of the time, when doing open world stuff, it's okay. It's even good in some spots. But during certain story moments of great significance, I just can't explain some of the choices made here. Maybe they wanted to add a sprinkle of modern music on top, but it just ends up feeling so jarring and out of place. Forget about rap music in combat, there are more aggravating tracks than that, even early on in the main story. I get that we're moving more and more away from historical accuracy with each passing installment, but for me, this goes too far beyond that for my own taste. It's just a personal preference. Now, since I mentioned the open world previously, another topic is side content. Obviously, the game is quite large. Make no mistake, you can definitely get overwhelmed by the number of things that will pop up on the map and the vastness of it, no matter what comparison people might draw with previous installments. I think that there's a certain cap in how many times I can repeat the same activity and still enjoy it, and AC games consistently seem to go way over that cap. So you will be repeating the same castle runs, enemy hideouts, pray to temples, complete memories or archery challenges, and so on, so many times that you will forget why you even enjoyed them in the first place. Well, mainly for the knowledge points, because they are needed to progress to the next rank, which unlocks more skills. But I can't really put my finger if this is something that really annoys me or something that I can go beyond, because I mean, it's part of the progression. It kind of feels a bit limiting at times and annoying because you may end up dreading the idea of having to complete these activities in order to unlock the next ranks of skills in the first place. Maybe the Kujikiris are an outlier over here since they involve small memory stories from now ways past, so even if the premise is the same, at least you get some extra context in her background. But even so, it's her old version, so you don't get to play with the current version with the best possible upgrades, you revert back to the sub-level 1. So in this case, it's like going between playing your level 50 character maxed out and decked in gear to a level 1 that doesn't even have the basic upgrades. It doesn't always click with you. At least, performance-wise, I can't really fault the game too much. It ran surprisingly good on my system, but maybe this is another story a la Monster Hunter Wilds that also ran very well for me, but for pretty much everybody else, it did not, just because I have a very powerful PC. So full disclaimer on that, I tested this on two systems. One is mine with 4090 at a 1440p resolution with no frame generation and everything maxed out. It seems to run very smoothly. I had absolutely no crashes and was running 60 FPS at the very worst of the worst scenes. Typically, it's way higher than that. I also played the version via GeForce Now initially, which has the equivalent of a 4080 on that version, but on a 1 GB per second connection from Eastern Europe, which should have been a pretty bad spot to be in, but even then, no latency, everything just ran very smoothly. Look, I just have a powerful PC, I'm not sure exactly what to tell you. So for me, it feels very stable, one of the most stable launches in recent memory in terms of AC games, but not without bugs. We had some bugs, including clipping through various structures on a few occasions, NPCs behaving hectic here and there. However, a lot of these were actually patched out on a day one patch that went out on the 17th. So by the time the game comes out, you're going to have many of those fixes up as well. So to summarize all of this into the biggest pros and cons, in terms of pros, Assassin's Creed Shadows continues to have a solid and impactful combat despite some of the problems I highlighted. It's also going to feature a gorgeous open world, good performance, and also the seasonal changes feel very useful and non-gimmicky, as well as with the base building also seems to provide some very big benefits. Plus, the ally system seems solid and provides some nice benefits in combat too. The cons, on the other hand, include the fact that Yasuke feels less useful than he should be, the story and the choices felt lacking, soundtrack didn't really fit the greater moments, the side content for the most part is repetitive, and there's little to no reactivity from the open world. But let me know down below in the comments, what is your opinion of Assassin's Creed Shadows? Are you planning to play right now, wait for sale, or never touch it? In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.